Alright, let's talk about something that's been on my mind lately, the 2000s TV shows that somehow slipped through the cracks. You know, the ones that didn't get the love they deserved, even though they were just as good, if not better, than some of the decade's biggest hits. I mean, don't get me wrong, The Wire and Lost are iconic, but there's a whole world of underrated gems out there that barely get mentioned today. And honestly, it's a shame, because some of these shows were ahead of their time. So, let's dive in, shall we? First up, Pushing Daisies. Personally, I think this show is a masterpiece of quirkiness. It's like someone took a fairy tale, mixed it with a crime procedural, and sprinkled it with dark humor. Lee Pace plays Ned, a pie maker with a bizarre gift. He can bring people back to life with a touch. But here's the catch, if they stay alive for more than a minute, someone else dies. It's a high-stakes, morally complex premise, but the show handles it with such charm and whimsy. What makes this really interesting is how it balances the macabre with vibrant visuals and a narrator who feels like he's reading you a bedtime story. It's no wonder it has a cult following, but in my opinion, it deserved way more mainstream attention. The fact that it got cancelled after 2 seasons still feels like a missed opportunity. If you take a step back and think about it, this show was basically Dead to Me meets Twin Peaks, but with a dash of Amelie. It's a recipe for greatness, yet it's rarely part of the conversation today. Then there's Veronica Mars. Now, this one did get a revival, both a movie and a 4th season, but it's still not talked about as much as it should be. Kristen Bell plays a high school student who's also a private investigator, and the show blends Case of the Week episodes with a larger, season-long mystery. What many people don't realize is how ahead of its time this show was in terms of female-led storytelling. Veronica wasn't just a detective, she was a fully realized character with flaws, strengths, and a complicated family dynamic. From my perspective, it's one of the best examples of how to do a teen drama without treating its audience like they're dumb. Yet, it's often overshadowed by other shows of its era. Why? I think it's because it didn't fit neatly into any one genre. It was part mystery, part drama, part coming-of-age story. And maybe that's why it's so underrated. Now, let's talk about Jericho. This show is a post-apocalyptic drama that aired in 2006, and it's criminally overlooked. It's about a small town in Kansas trying to survive after a nuclear attack devastates the U.S. What this really suggests is that long before The Walking Dead or Yellow Jackets, Jericho was exploring themes of community, survival, and the fragility of society. One thing that immediately stands out is how grounded it feels. It's not about superheroes or zombies, it's about ordinary people dealing with extraordinary circumstances. And yet, despite its quality and a dedicated fan base, it got cancelled after 2 seasons. Fans even campaigned to bring it back, and it briefly continued as a comic series. But here's the thing, why didn't it become a mainstream hit? I think it's because it was too real. It didn't have the escapism of other shows, it forced you to confront uncomfortable questions about what you do in that situation. And maybe that's why it's still so relevant today. Another show that deserves more love is Everwood. If you're a fan of Virgin River or Heart of Dixie, this is your show. It's a heartwarming drama about a widowed neurosurgeon who moves his family to a small town in Colorado. What makes this really interesting is how it balances emotional depth with small-town charm. It's not just about the characters, it's about how they grow and heal together. In my opinion, it's one of the best family dramas of the 2000s, yet it's rarely mentioned in the same breath as Gilmore Girls or One Tree Hill. Maybe it's because it didn't have a hook as obvious as a love triangle or a quirky lead. But if you take a step back and think about it, that's exactly why it's so good. It's understated, genuine, and deeply human. And let's not forget Yes, Dear, a sitcom that's practically been erased from collective memory. It's about 2 families with different parenting styles living under one roof, and it's hilarious. What many people don't realize is that it was a solid entry in the sitcom landscape of the 2000s, airing alongside heavyweights like Scrubs and 2.5 Men. But here's the thing, it didn't have the same level of absurdity or edge as those shows. It was more grounded, more relatable. And maybe that's why it's been forgotten. In a decade that celebrated over-the-top humor, Yes, Dear was quietly funny, and that's what makes it so charming. Personally, I think it's a perfect example of how not every great show needs to be groundbreaking to be memorable. Finally, there's The Smoking Room, a British sitcom that's so underrated it's practically unknown outside the UK. It's set entirely in a smoking room, where co-workers gather to chat, argue, and bond. What makes this really interesting is how it takes a mundane setting and turns it into a microcosm of human interaction. The dialogue is sharp, the characters are quirky, and the humor is dry, very British. But here's the kicker, the show got cancelled because the UK banned indoor smoking, rendering its premise obsolete. If you take a step back and think about it, that's both hilarious and tragic. It's a show that was literally a victim of its time, and that's what makes it so fascinating. So, what's the takeaway here? I think it's this: the 2000s were a golden age for TV, but not every great show got the recognition it deserved. Some were too quirky, too real, or too ahead of their time. And that's what makes them so worth revisiting. Because in a world where we're constantly chasing the next big hit, these underrated gems remind us that sometimes the best stories are the ones that fly under the radar. What do you think? Are there any 2000s shows you feel are unfairly forgotten? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear your thoughts.